The city never truly sleeps, but at 2:47 in the morning, Manhattan pretends. Yellow cabs thin to a trickle along avenues that will choke with traffic in a few hours. Restaurants shutter their kitchens. Office towers go dark floor by floor until only the cleaning crews remain, pushing their carts through corridors that echo with the ghosts of daytime ambition. This is the hour when 8 million lives settle into something almost peaceful, when even the sirens seem to hold their breath. 47 floors above the pretending city, a 7-year-old girl stood on a balcony ledge. Her name was Lily Ashford. Dark hair tangled by wind and 3 days of neglect whipped around her face. Her feet were bare against the concrete, small toes curling over the edge where the railing met the night. She wore pajamas with cartoon elephants on them, a gift from a father who would never give her anything again. The wind pressed the thin fabric against her small frame, and she did not shiver. She had stopped feeling cold the same day she stopped feeling everything else. Below her, the city spread out like a circuit board of scattered lights. Cars moved in patterns that seemed random but were not. People walked dogs. Couples kissed under awnings. Somewhere down there, a child her age was probably sleeping in a bed with a father who would wake her for school in the morning. Somewhere down there, the world continued as if nothing had broken. Lily was not looking at the city. She was looking through it, searching for something that was not there, would never be there again. Behind her, through the glass doors separating the balcony from the penthouse living room, chaos unfolded in the particular way that expensive chaos unfolds quietly, professionally, with people trained to handle crises, speaking in measured tones that masked their terror. Victoria Ashford had built a $14 billion pharmaceutical empire on her ability to remain calm under pressure. At 42, she had faced down hostile takeovers, FDA investigations, shareholder revolts, and 100 other catastrophes that would have broken lesser executives. She had been trained since childhood to treat emotion as the enemy of success, to compartmentalize, to act rather than react. None of that training helped her now. Her daughter was standing on a ledge, and Victoria could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except press her hand against the glass door and whisper her daughter's name over and over, like a prayer that had already been denied. Raymond Cross, head of security, stood beside her with the rigid posture of a man who had spent 20 years protecting presidents and senators, but had never felt this helpless. His hand hovered near his earpiece, ready to call for backup for crisis teams for anyone who might know what to do. But he had seen enough jumpers in his career to understand that wrong moves killed faster than gravity. Any sudden noise, any unexpected approach, any shift in the delicate balance of a mind already teetering, and the child would be gone before anyone could reach her. Dr. Catherine Patterson, the ninth therapist Victoria had hired in 8 months, stood frozen with her clipboard clutched to her chest. She had treated trauma in children for 25 years, had published papers, given lectures, trained other therapists in the delicate art of reaching damaged young minds. She had never once encountered a child she could not eventually reach. Until Lily Ashford. The girl had not spoken a word in 243 days, not to her mother, not to the therapists, not to the parade of specialists who flew in from Boston, Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, each one more expensive than the last, each one leaving with the same apologetic shrug and the same bill that Victoria paid without question, because money was supposed to solve things. Money was supposed to be power. Money was supposed to buy whatever you needed. Money could not buy her daughter's voice back. Money could not buy her husband back from the Atlantic Ocean. Money could not buy the moment before Lily saw the news footage of the helicopter wreckage, before she understood what it meant, before something fundamental in her small heart simply shut down. Victoria pressed harder against the glass, her breath fogging the surface. "Lily, baby, please, come back inside." The words disappeared into the wind. The child did not turn around. Raymond stepped closer, his voice low. "Mrs. Ashford, we need to call the crisis intervention team. They're trained for this." Victoria's response came out strangled, barely human. "She's 7 years old. She's not a crisis. She's my daughter." "Ma'am, I understand, but you don't understand anything." Victoria spun to face him, and the look in her eyes made the former Secret Service agent take an involuntary step backward. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your child disappear while she's still standing right in front of you. You don't understand what it's like to have all the money in the world and not be able to buy your daughter a single moment of peace. Patterson cleared her throat. Victoria, perhaps if I approach slowly, use some of the techniques we discussed. Your techniques haven't worked in 8 months. Your techniques haven't gotten her to speak a single word. Your techniques, the elevator chimed. Everyone turned toward the sound, toward the service elevator that the cleaning staff used, the one that opened into the back hallway rather than the main entrance. The doors slid apart with a soft pneumatic hiss, and a man stepped out, pushing a maintenance cart. He was 58 years old, though he looked older. The kind of older that comes not from years but from weight, from carrying something invisible that presses down on the shoulders and etches itself into the lines around the eyes. His hair had gone gray early, not distinguished silver, but the dull ash of exhaustion. His uniform was the blue-gray of Ashford Tower's maintenance staff, faded from countless washings, a small coffee stain near the collar that he had not bothered to treat, because who would notice, who would care? His name was Marcus Cole, and he had been invisible for 10 years. He stopped when he saw the scene before him, the woman in the designer robe pressed against the glass, the security chief with his hand on his earpiece, the therapist with her useless clipboard, and beyond them all, through the glass, the small figure standing on the ledge. Raymond moved to intercept him, voice sharp. This area is restricted. Go back the way you came. Marcus did not respond. His eyes had locked onto the child on the balcony, onto the way she stood, with her shoulders slumped forward onto the angle of her head as she stared into nothing. He had seen that posture before. He had held that posture himself 10 years ago, standing on a different ledge, looking down at different water. Sir, I need you to leave immediately. This is a private— Marcus walked past him as if he had not spoken. Victoria turned her face a mask of confusion and desperate hope and terror all at once. Who are you? What are you doing? Marcus stopped at the glass door, his hand resting on the handle. For a long moment, he just looked at the child, at the way the wind lifted her dark hair, at the elephant pajamas that looked too thin for the March cold. She's not going to jump. His voice was low, rough from disuse. He worked nights precisely because nights meant no one expected him to talk. Raymond grabbed his shoulder. You need to step away right now. Marcus finally looked at him, and something in his eyes made Raymond's grip falter. It was not anger. It was not defiance. It was recognition, the kind that comes from having visited a place so dark that you can always see it in others who have been there too. She's not going to jump because she's not trying to die. She's trying to feel something, anything, even fear. Victoria's voice cracked. How could you possibly know that? Marcus did not answer. He opened the glass door and stepped onto the balcony. The wind hit him immediately, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of exhaust and distant rain and all the ordinary miseries of a city that kept churning, regardless of what happened in any single penthouse. He did not approach the child. Instead, he sat down on the concrete about 10 feet away from her, his back against the wall, his legs stretched out in front of him. He pulled his maintenance cap off and set it beside him, ran his hand through hair that had gone thin on top. Looked out at the same view Lily was looking at, the lights of Manhattan, spreading toward the horizon like a galaxy fallen to Earth. 1 minute passed. 2. Inside, Victoria watched through the gauze, her hand pressed so hard against her mouth that she could feel her teeth through her lips. Raymond had his phone out, ready to call emergency services at the first sign of danger. Dr. Patterson was scribbling notes on her clipboard, professional instincts overriding common sense, because that was all she had. That was the only tool in her toolbox. On the balcony, Marcus sat in silence. He did not try to convince the child to come down, did not offer reassurance or comfort or any of the things that well-meaning adults had probably been offering her for 8 months. He just sat there, sharing the cold, sharing the dark, sharing the view of a world that kept spinning without permission. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely louder than the wind. You know what I've noticed about high places? When you're up here looking down, everything seems smaller. The cars look like toys. The people look like ants. And if everything else is small, maybe the thing inside you that hurts so much is small too. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? That maybe from up here, the pain won't be so big. Lily did not move, but she had stopped swaying with the wind. I stood on a bridge once, Brooklyn Bridge, middle of the night, just like this. I stood there for 3 hours looking at the East River, thinking about how cold the water must be, thinking about whether it would hurt when I hit or whether it would be over too fast to feel anything. Inside, Victoria made a sound that was not quite a sob. Raymond's hand tightened on his phone. You know why I didn't jump? It wasn't because I wanted to live. I didn't, not then. I wanted to be dead so badly I could taste it, and it tasted like relief. Lily's head turned slightly, not looking at him yet, but no longer looking at nothing. I didn't jump because I was holding something, a stuffed bear that belonged to my son, and I couldn't figure out what to do with it. Couldn't throw it in the river because then it would be gone, really gone, and it was all I had left. Couldn't take it with me when I jumped because what if someone found it floating and didn't know what it meant? So I just stood there, stuck, not able to go forward and not able to go back, holding on to this ratty little bear like it was the only real thing left in the world. Lily turned her head fully now, looking at him for the first time. Her eyes held knowledge that childhood was never supposed to contain the gaze of someone who had aged past their years in the space of a single terrible moment. Your son gave you a bear. Victoria made a strangled sound through her hand. Patterson dropped her pen. Lily Ashford had spoken. Not a word, not a whisper, not the barest acknowledgement of the living world in 243 days. And now she had spoken to a stranger in a maintenance uniform who had sat down on her balcony and told her about wanting to die. Marcus did not react to the miracle, did not celebrate or exclaim or draw attention to what had just happened. He simply answered the question as if they had been having a conversation all along. His name was Daniel. He was 6 years old. He named the bear Bear because he said complicated names were for complicated feelings, and Bear just wanted simple things: to be held, to be remembered, to not be alone in the dark. Lily took a small step away from the edge, not toward him, but away from the drop. Daniel died 10 years ago, car accident. I was driving. That's sad. It is. Did Bear help? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stuffed animal, worn nearly bald in places stitched together from fabric that had once been a blue t-shirt with rocket ships on it. One eye hung loose on a thread. The stuffing had compressed over the years into something lumpy and misshapen, but it had clearly been carried every day, handled with the careful devotion of a relic. Bear tried to help, but Bear got lonely. 10 years is a long time to be held by someone who doesn't know how to hold on anymore. Lily took another step away from the ledge. Her eyes were fixed on the stuffed animal. You still carry Bear with you, every day, in case I meet someone who needs him more than I do. Marcus set the bear down on the concrete between them, the same way you might place a candle in a shrine, an offering with no expectation of return. I think Bear has been waiting to meet you. I think maybe that's why I didn't jump off that bridge 10 years ago. So Bear could be here tonight. So Bear could find someone who understands what it means to have emptiness where someone used to be. Lily stood very still, looking at the bear, at this piece of someone else's grief offered freely, without strings or conditions, or the demand that she be grateful or heal on anyone else's schedule. Then she walked toward it, not toward Marcus, toward Bear. She knelt down on the cold concrete and picked up the stuffed animal with both hands, cradling it against her chest, the way a child cradles something precious. Bear's ear is loose. I never learned to sew. My daddy could sew. He fixed my elephant pajamas when they got a hole. Lily looked down at the cartoon elephants, at the nearly invisible men near the hemline. I didn't want anyone else to fix them after he died, so I'm careful with them. Inside, Victoria was crying, her body shaking with the release of 8 months of terror and helplessness in the desperate hope she had kept buried, because hoping hurt too much when hope never came. On the balcony, Marcus did not move from his spot against the wall, did not reach for the child or try to pull her into an embrace or do any of the things adults are supposed to do when children are in distress. You don't have to talk, he said. You don't have to come inside. You don't have to do anything at all. But Bear doesn't like the cold much, and I think there might be a warm spot somewhere inside where Bear could rest for a while. Lily looked at him, then at the glass doors, then back at Bear. She hugged the stuffed animal tighter. Will you stay? If you want me to. I want you to. She walked toward the door, away from the ledge, away from the night that had almost swallowed her whole. She walked past Victoria without looking at her mother, past Raymond and Dr. Tudor, Patterson and all the professionals who had failed to reach her, clutching a ratty stuffed bear, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the earth. Marcus stayed on the balcony for another minute alone with the wind and the view and the ghost of a moment that had almost ended differently. Then he stood, brushed the concrete dust from his uniform pants, and followed the child inside. Victoria intercepted him before he could reach the living room, her hands grabbing his arm with a grip that would leave bruises. "Who are you? How did you do that? She hasn't spoken in 8 months. 8 months, and you—" Marcus looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and Victoria saw the same thing in his eyes that had made Raymond falter earlier. The recognition. The weight. "I should get back to my shift." His voice was flat empty. "I apologize for the intrusion." He gently removed her hand and started walking toward the service elevator. "Wait, please, just wait." Victoria's voice cracked on the last word, all her executive composure stripped away by 8 months of failure and one inexplicable moment of success. Marcus stopped but did not turn around. "At least tell me your name." A long pause. Then Marcus Cole. "Mr. Cole, I need to understand what happened out there. My daughter, she wasn't going to jump." Marcus finally turned to face her. She was standing on that ledge because it was the only place she could feel anything. The cold, the wind, the fear of falling. Anything is better than nothing. Even terror is better than the emptiness. Victoria stared at him, this maintenance worker in his stained uniform, speaking about her daughter's psyche with more insight than 9 therapists combined. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I stood on the same ledge, different bridge, same darkness." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I should go." "No." Victoria stepped in front of him, blocking his path to the elevator. "Please, I need to understand. I've spent $400,000 on specialists. The best in the world. None of them could get through to her. You sat down and talked to her for 5 minutes, and she spoke. After 8 months, she spoke." Marcus looked toward the hallway where Lily had disappeared, still clutching Bear. Something flickered across his face, not quite pain, but the shadow of it like sunlight through heavy clouds. "There's nothing to understand. I didn't do anything special. I just didn't lie to her, Janitor." "What does that mean?" "It means I didn't tell her it would get better. I didn't tell her the pain would go away. I didn't tell her any of the things adults tell children when they want them to stop hurting, because children hurting makes adults uncomfortable." Marcus's voice was quiet but sharp. "She didn't need to hear that things would be okay. She needed to hear that it's not okay and that's allowed, that someone else knew what it felt like to carry absence like a stone in your chest." Victoria felt her knees weaken. She braced herself against the wall, suddenly exhausted by everything. The terror of the past hour, the 8 months before it, the loss she still had not processed, the daughter she could not reach. "My husband died 8 months ago. Helicopter crash over the Atlantic. Lily saw it on the news before anyone could stop her. She watched them pull wreckage from the water, watched divers searching for his body, which they never found." Victoria's voice had gone hollow. She stopped speaking that day. Just stopped, like someone turned off a switch inside her. Marcus said nothing, but he did not leave. "I've tried everything. Therapist, medication, specialized programs. I offered one doctor $1 million to focus exclusively on Lily's case. $1 million. Do you know what she said? She said money couldn't fix trauma. That healing takes time. That I needed to be patient." Victoria laughed, and it was the ugliest sound she had ever made. Be patient. My daughter was standing on a ledge, and I'm supposed to be patient. Marcus stood very still, and Victoria had the strange sense that he was weighing something, making a decision that had nothing to do with the immediate situation and everything to do with something older, deeper. Finally, he spoke. "My son's name was Daniel. He died 10 years ago. He was 6 years old, same age your daughter was when she lost her father. I was driving. I looked away for 1 second to change the radio station, and a drunk driver ran a red light. Daniel was in the passenger seat. He was telling me about dinosaurs, about how T-Rex couldn't actually roar, that scientists think they made sounds like crocodiles. He was so excited about this fact, this piece of information he'd learned that day. And I looked away because I wanted to find a song my wife liked, and when I looked back, everything was ending." Victoria stopped breathing. Marcus continued, his voice carefully controlled. "My wife blamed me. I blamed myself. She couldn't look at me anymore. Every time she saw my face, she saw Daniel's absence. She filed for divorce. I quit my job, walked out on my students in the middle of a class, and spent the next 3 years trying to disappear completely. I came to New York because no one knew me here. I took the night shift because nights meant I didn't have to talk to anyone, didn't have to pretend to be a person when I'd stopped feeling like one. He met Victoria's eyes, and she saw it clearly now. Not sympathy, not empathy, but recognition. The look of someone who had traveled to the same dark country and somehow found their way back. I'm not qualified to help your daughter. I have no training, no credentials, no expertise. I'm just a man who cleans floors and carries around a stuffed bear because it's all I have left of the only person I've ever loved without reservation. Marcus turned toward the elevator again. But if she asks for me, I'll come back. Not to fix her. Nobody can fix another person. But to sit with her in the dark till she's ready to find her own light. Victoria watched him go, this stranger who had appeared from nowhere and reached her daughter when no one else could, and she felt something she had not felt in 8 months, the first fragile stirring of hope. Behind her, Dr. Patterson approached, tablet in hand. Victoria, I need to advise against any further contact with that man. We don't know anything about him. He could be the only person who's helped Lily since Jonathan died. That may be true, but there are proper channels for this kind of intervention. Professional boundaries, legal considerations. We can't just what? Can't just let my daughter talk to someone she's willing to talk to. Can't just acknowledge that your professional approach has failed completely. Deirdre Patterson flinched. Victoria's voice dropped to something cold and final. I want everything you can find on Marcus Cole. Employment history, background check, criminal record, if there is one. I want to know who he is and where he came from and what happened to his son. I want it on my desk by morning. She walked toward Lily's room without waiting for a response. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, Victoria could see her daughter curled up on her bed, the stuffed bear clutched against her chest, her eyes closed. Not asleep, Lily's breathing was too irregular for sleep, but resting maybe. Finding peace in the presence of an inanimate object that someone had loved enough to carry for 10 years. Victoria did not enter the room. She just stood there in the hallway, watching her daughter hold on to a stranger's grief like a lifeline, and wondered if this was what hope felt like. This terrible, fragile thing that could shatter at any moment, but demanded to be held anyway. The report landed on Victoria's desk at 7:23 the next morning. Raymond had pulled strings, called in favors from his Secret Service contacts, accessed databases that were not supposed to be accessible to private citizens. What he found was simultaneously ordinary and devastating, the story of a man who had done everything right until one moment of inattention changed everything. Marcus Cole, born 1966 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, enlisted in the Army at 18, served through the Gulf War, received a Bronze Star for actions that were still partially classified, but involved pulling wounded soldiers from a disabled vehicle under fire. Came home with a medal and what they were just starting to call PTSD, but that veterans of his generation mostly called dealing with it. Used his GI Bill to get a teaching degree. Taught first grade at Jefferson Elementary in Philadelphia for 15 years. Beloved by students and parents alike. Consistently rated as one of the top elementary teachers in the district. There were letters in his file from parents thanking him for making their children love learning, for noticing when a student was struggling at home, for being the kind of teacher that kids remembered their whole lives. Married Sarah Chen, a nurse at Philadelphia General in 1998. Son Daniel, born 2004. Car accident in 2014. Marcus driving. Daniel in the passenger seat. Drunk driver named Gerald Hoffman ran a red light doing 60 in a 35 zone. Daniel died at the scene. Marcus survived with 3 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and head trauma that kept him unconscious for 2 days. Hoffman got 8 years. Marcus got a lifetime. Sarah filed for divorce 6 months after the accident. No contested assets, no fight over custody, because there was no child to fight over anymore. Marcus signed everything, surrendered everything, walked away from everything. He resigned from Jefferson Elementary in March 2015 mid-school year without notice. Just stood up in the middle of a lesson about the letter May, walked out of the classroom, got in his car, and drove away. 23 first graders watched their teacher leave and never come back. Parents were furious. The school board was sympathetic but had no choice but to formally terminate him. After that, Marcus Cole effectively ceased to exist. No credit card activity, no tax returns, no driver's license renewals, apartment leases, medical records. For 3 years, he was a ghost, moving through homeless shelters, taking day labor jobs that paid cash, drinking more than he should have, standing on bridges at night, and trying to find reasons not to jump. He reappeared in 2018, applying for a maintenance position at Ashford Tower through a temp agency that did not ask too many questions. He had been working the night shift ever since. Never missed a shift, never caused problems, never spoke to anyone unless absolutely necessary. The supervisor described him as reliable and invisible, which was apparently the highest compliment in the world of commercial maintenance. Victoria read the report 3 times. She thought about a man carrying a stuffed bear for 10 years because it was all he had left. She thought about 23 first graders whose teacher walked out and never came back, and she tried to reconcile that abandonment with the man who had sat down on a cold balcony and talked to her daughter back from the edge. She thought about her own coping mechanisms, the work, the meetings, the relentless forward motion that kept her from ever having to stop and feel what had happened to her family. Was she so different? She had not walked out on anyone physically, but she had walked out emotionally, retreated into the fortress of CEO and corporate strategy and shareholder value because facing Lily's silence was too hard, too painful, too much like looking into a mirror that showed her everything she had failed to be as a mother. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Patterson: Lily is awake and asking for the man from last night. What should I tell her? Victoria stared at the message for a long moment. Then she called Raymond. Bring Marcus Cole to my office. Yeah. 3 floors below Victoria Ashford's penthouse in an office that was slightly smaller but no less expensively furnished. Victoria Demont sat behind her mahogany desk reviewing quarterly reports she had already memorized 3 times over. Demont was 58 years old with silver hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that cataloged weaknesses the way an accountant cataloged numbers. She had joined Ashford Pharmaceuticals 30 years ago as a junior analyst, fresh from Wharton, had clawed her way up through every level of the company, had navigated the politics and the backstabbing and the endless parade of men who assumed a woman couldn't possibly understand the pharmaceutical industry. She had understood it better than any of them, had positioned herself through 3 decades of careful maneuvering as the obvious choice for CEO when Harrison Ashford finally retired. And then Harrison had chosen his daughter instead. Family legacy, he had announced at the board meeting 15 years ago, his voice carrying that particular tone of a man who expected his decisions to be accepted without question. Victoria has been groomed for this since childhood. She understands the company in her blood. DeMonte had smiled and congratulated the younger Victoria and buried her rage so deep that no one ever saw it. But she had not forgotten, had not stopped watching, had not stopped waiting for the opportunity that would eventually come. Jonathan Ashford's death had been that opportunity. DeMonte had watched Victoria crumble over the past 8 months with the patience of a surgeon observing a patient who didn't yet know they were terminal. The missed meetings that Victoria's assistants scrambled to cover. The delegated responsibilities that once would have been handled personally. The slow erosion of the iron control that had made Victoria an effective CEO, not as good as DeMonte would have been, but effective enough to keep the board satisfied. The board was no longer satisfied. DeMonte had been cultivating them for months. A lunch here, a golf game there, carefully planted concerns about leadership stability and the company's direction during this difficult time. She had votes lined up, not enough for an outright coup, not yet, but enough to make Victoria vulnerable. And now this, a janitor of all things, a maintenance worker with a dead son and a history of mental instability, playing therapist to the CEO's daughter. It was almost too perfect. DeMonte picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never saved in her contacts. Kevin, I need you to compile everything you can find on Marcus Cole. Employment records, medical history, anything that didn't make it into the official background check. She paused, letting the weight of the request settle. And I want to know exactly what's happening in that penthouse. Anything unusual, anything that could be concerning to outside parties. Kevin Marsh was a security officer on the night shift, a man with gambling debts and a flexible relationship with ethics. He had been on DeMonte's unofficial payroll for 3 years, providing information about Victoria's movements, her conversations, her vulnerabilities. The payments went through a shell company that couldn't be traced back to DeMonte, and Kevin was smart enough to know that betraying her would be far more dangerous than betraying his employer. The janitor, Kevin's voice was curious. I heard about last night, the kid on the ledge. I want to know everything about him, where he lives, what he does, who he talks to, and I want to know what Mrs. Ashford is planning to do with him. That might take some time. You have 48 hours. There's a bonus if you can get me something useful in 24. She hung up without waiting for confirmation and turned back to her window, looking out at the same city Victoria looked out at from 3 floors above. Some opportunities you created, some you waited for, and some walked in the door wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying a decade of exploitable trauma. DeMonte had waited 15 years to become CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals. She could wait a little longer, but not much longer. They found Marcus in the maintenance break room, sitting alone at a table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He looked up when Raymond entered, but did not seem surprised, did not ask questions, just nodded, set down the cup, and followed. Victoria's office occupied the top floor of Ashford Tower, a glass and steel monument to corporate success that her father had designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city that had made the Ashford family rich. The furniture was chosen not for comfort, but for impression. Sleek, minimal, each piece worth more than most people's cars. Marcus looked profoundly out of place in his maintenance uniform, standing on carpet that probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. But he did not seem uncomfortable. He did not seem much of anything, really. Just present, waiting like a man who had run out of expectations a long time ago. Victoria gestured to a chair. Marcus sat. I read your file. Victoria did not believe in small talk. You were a teacher, a good one by all accounts. Then your son died and you fell apart. Marcus's expression did not change. That's accurate. You walked out on 23 students in the middle of a school year. Also accurate. And then you disappeared for 3 years before showing up here. I wasn't ready to be around people. I'm still not sure I am. Victoria leaned forward. Then why did you approach my daughter last night? Why not just leave like Raymond told you to? For the first time, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Not quite emotion, but the shadow of one. Because she reminded me of Daniel. Not how she looked, how she stood. The angle of her shoulders, the way she was looking at something that wasn't there. He paused. And because 10 years ago, when I was standing on that bridge, I wish someone had sat down with me instead of trying to talk me off the ledge. I wish someone had just been there, not to fix me, not to save me, just to acknowledge that the dark place was real and that I wasn't crazy for being stuck in it. Victoria absorbed this. My daughter asked for you this morning. She hasn't asked for anything in 8 months. Marcus did not respond, but Victoria saw his hands tighten slightly in his lap. I want to hire you. Whatever Marcus had been expecting, it was not that. His carefully blank expression faltered. I already work here. Not as a maintenance worker, as... Victoria searched for the right word and could not find it. As a companion for Lily. Someone she can talk to. Someone who understands what she's going through without trying to therapize her out of it. I'm not qualified for anything like that. I've spent $400,000 on qualified people. They failed. Victoria stood, moved to the window, looked out at the city that suddenly seemed very small. My daughter tried to kill herself last night. She's 7 years old and she stood on a ledge, 47 floors up, because dying seemed better than living with the pain. And then a man with a stuffed bear sat down and talked to her, and she came back inside. She turned to face him. I don't care about qualifications. I don't care about credentials. I care about my daughter being alive and speaking words and maybe eventually finding a way to live with what happened to her. You're the only person who's gotten through to her. So I'm asking you, I'm begging you, if I have to help me save her. Marcus sat very still for a long moment. Victoria could see the struggle on his face, the war between the part of him that had been dead for 10 years and whatever small thing Lily had awakened the night before. I can't promise to fix her. I couldn't fix myself. I'm not asking you to fix her. I'm asking you to what's there, to show her that broken people can still exist. That being damaged doesn't mean being worthless. Marcus looked at his hands, calloused and rough from years of manual labor, hands that had once helped first graders learn to write their names. hands that had held his son's small fingers as they crossed streets together. What exactly would I do? Whatever she needs. Talk to her if she wants to talk. Sit with her in silence if she doesn't. Tell her stories. Listen to her when she's ready to share her own. Just, Victoria's voice caught, just don't leave. Something passed through Marcus's eyes at that word leave. The weight of all the people and places he had walked away from, all the responsibilities he had abandoned, all the pieces of himself he had shed over 10 years of trying to become small enough to disappear. Okay, the word came out rough, dragged from somewhere deep. I'll try, but I reserve the right to walk away if I think I'm making things worse. And I reserve the right to fire you if you do. Victoria's executive edge returned, but softer now. We'll start with a trial period. 1 month. You'll be paid as a consultant, which means the benefits are better and the background check is already done. I don't need money. Everyone needs money. I need... Marcus stopped, reassessed, started again. I need to not become dependent on this, on her. I spent 10 years trying to disappear because being attached to something meant it could be taken away. If I start caring about your daughter and something happens, something already happened. Victoria's voice was gentle now, which surprised both of them. You care. You cared enough to break protocol, approach a child in crisis, give away the most precious thing you own. You can pretend you're still invisible, but we both know that's not true anymore. Marcus did not have an answer for that. Go home. Get some sleep. Come back tonight, 8 o'clock. Lily goes to bed at 9, but she doesn't sleep until much later. She'll be waiting for you. Marcus stood, moved toward the door, then stopped. Why 8 o'clock? Because that's when she usually starts screaming. The first evening, Marcus arrived at 7:45. Early because he had forgotten what it felt like to have somewhere to be, someone expecting him a purpose beyond the mechanical routine of pushing a cart down empty hallways. The penthouse was different in the early evening light, less sterile, more lived in. Evidence of a child scattered throughout a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, art supplies stacked in a corner, the chaos of books that had been pulled from shelves and abandoned from mid-story. Victoria was dressed for a board meeting. She had canceled her power suit, now wrinkled from an afternoon spent sitting on the floor outside Lily's room, waiting for sounds of distress that had not come. She's been quiet all day, hasn't left her room, but she's not crying. It's the longest she's gone without crying since... Victoria stopped, unable to finish the sentence. May I see her? Victoria led him to Lily's door. It was closed but not locked. Victoria had removed all the locks from interior doors. After the third time, Lily barricaded herself inside. Marcus knocked softly. No response. He knocked again. Lily, it's Marcus. From last night. I came to check on Bear. A long pause, then muffled through the door. Bear is sleeping. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus kept his voice steady. That's good. Bear doesn't sleep well most nights. Too many bad dreams. Another pause. Then you can come in, but be quiet. Marcus opened the door slowly. Lily's room was a shrine to a childhood interrupted. Toys that had not been played with in months. Drawings that stopped being made the day her father died. And in the corner, in a nest of blankets, she had clearly assembled herself. Lily sat with Bear pressed against her chest. She looked different than she had on the ledge. Smaller somehow. More fragile. The adrenaline of the night before had faded, leaving behind a 7-year-old girl who had learned too young that the world could take away the people you loved without warning or reason. Marcus sat down on the floor near the door, not too close, leaving her space to retreat if she needed it. How is Bear? Bear is sad. Lily stroked the worn fur. Bear misses Daniel. I know. Does Bear know Daniel isn't coming back? Marcus felt the question like a knife. Bear knows. Bear doesn't like it, but he knows. Lily nodded slowly as if this confirmed something she had suspected. Mommy doesn't know that about Daddy. She thinks if she works hard enough, if she buys enough, thinks if she makes enough money somehow, Daddy will come back. That's why she's always at the office, because she thinks she can fix it. Marcus absorbed this 7-year-old's devastating insight into her mother's coping mechanisms. What do you think, Bob? I think dead is dead. Lily's voice was flat, factual, the way children's voices sometimes are when they've learned a truth adults try to hide. Daddy is never coming back. not ever. And pretending he might is lying. Adults lie a lot. They do. You didn't lie last night. On the balcony. You said Daniel was dead and it was sad and nothing makes it not sad. That's true. Lily looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much. Are you going to lie to me now that mommy is paying you? The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. No, I won't lie to you. I'll tell you the truth even when it's ugly. Even when it makes adults uncomfortable. Promise. Promise. Lily considered this, then scooted over slightly in her blanket nest. Not an invitation to join, but an acknowledgement of presence. Permission to stay. Bear has bad dreams about the car crash. Bear was in the car when it happened. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Is that so? Bear saw everything. The glass breaking. The loud noise. Daniel being scared. Lily hugged Bear closer. Bear wishes he could have done something. Protected Daniel. But Bear is just a stuffed animal. Stuffed animals can't protect anyone. No, they can't. But they can remember. Bear remembers Daniel, and as long as Bear remembers Daniel isn't all the way gone. Marcus had to look away. He stared at the wall at a child's drawing that might have been a butterfly or might have been a flower, and he tried to breathe past the constriction in his chest. Your daddy, do you have something that helps you remember him? Lily pointed to the elephant pajamas. Daddy gave me these, and he fixed them when they got a hole. She touched the nearly invisible men near the hemline. Sometimes at night I pretend the pajamas are a hug from Daddy. It's not a real hug, but it's something. Something is better than nothing. That's what Bear says. They sat in silence for a while. Outside the sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks that neither of them looked at. The world was full of beauty, but beauty felt like a language they'd both forgotten how to speak. Eventually Lily said, will you come back tomorrow? If you want me to. I want you to. Then I'll come back. Promise. Promise, Bush. It was the second promise Marcus had made in 10 years. The first had been to himself, never care about anything again. He had just broken that one irreparably. He could feel it breaking, could feel something cracking open inside him that he had kept sealed shut since the day they lowered Daniel's small casket into the ground. Marcus. Yes. Thank you for giving me Bear. I know it was hard. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. And Marcus. Yes. I'm glad you didn't jump off the bridge. Marcus stayed until Lily fell asleep, Bear tucked under her chin, her breathing finally even and peaceful. He sat there in the darkening room watching a child he barely knew, dream whatever dreams children dream when they have already learned about loss, and he felt something he had not felt in a decade needed. Not wanted. Need was different. Wanted was optional. Need was essential. This child needed someone who understood, and for reasons he could not explain, he was that person. He crept out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. Victoria was waiting in the living room, a glass of wine untouched on the table beside her. She slept. Victoria's voice was awed. She actually slept. Without screaming, without nightmares, without waking up crying for Jonathan. She's exhausted. Grief is exhausting. What did you talk about? Marcus considered how much to share. She told me about Bear's bad dreams and about her daddy fixing her pajamas. Victoria's face crumpled. I didn't know he fixed them. I didn't even know about the hole. He must have done it when I was at work, when I was always at work. She stopped herself, pressed her hand against her eyes. I miss so much. I was building a company while Jonathan was building a relationship with her. And now he's gone and she has all these memories of him, all these moments they shared, and I'm just the person who pays the bills, the person who calls in the experts, the person who stands outside her door and doesn't know how to get in. Marcus stood awkwardly, unprepared for a grieving mother's confession. She mentioned you, tonight. Victoria looked up. She did. She said you work hard because you're trying to fix what happened, trying to find a way to bring him back. Victoria laughed a bitter, broken sound. A 7-year-old diagnosed my denial complex better than any therapist. Children see things clearly. They haven't learned to complicate the truth yet. Victoria wiped her eyes, pulled herself together with visible effort. I should let you go. It's late. You probably have a normal life to get back to. Marcus almost laughed at that. I work the night shift and live in a studio apartment in Queens. My normal life is pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways until sunrise. Not anymore. I told HR to take you off the maintenance rotation. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Victoria's voice firmed. Lily needs you. Whatever that means, whatever that looks like, she needs you. So for now, your job is being available for her. Everything else is secondary. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some boundary between himself and this wealthy woman and her damaged daughter. But the truth was he had nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. The maintenance cart and the empty hallways would still be there if this experiment failed. In the meantime, maybe he could do some small good. I'll come back tomorrow night, same time. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me yet. I might make everything worse. You won't. He did not know how she could be so sure. He was not sure of anything except that a 7-year-old girl was sleeping peacefully for the first time in 8 months, and that he had promised to come back. Promises mattered. He had learned that from Daniel. The first week passed in a haze of tentative connection. Marcus came every evening at 8. He sat in Lily's room, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, always patient. He learned that she liked to draw, but had stopped because her father used to draw with her, and it hurt too much to draw alone. He learned that she had memorized every dinosaur name Daniel had taught her through bear stories, even though she had never met Daniel, even though the information came secondhand through a stuffed animal's memories. He learned that she thought about her father constantly, but could not talk about him to her mother because her mother started crying, and Lily did not want to make her mother sad. Mommy is already sit home. Ma'am, Lily explained one evening methodically, brushing Bear's worn fur with a child's hairbrush. But she hides it. She puts on her work face and pretends everything is okay because that's what Mommy does. She solves problems. But Daddy dying isn't a problem she can solve, so she doesn't know what to do with her face. Marcus marveled at this child's emotional intelligence. Have you told her that? No, because then she'd know I see through her face and she'd be embarrassed. Adults don't like when children see them being weak. Some adults. Lily looked at him. You're different. You don't hide your sad face. I spent 10 years hiding it. I got tired. I'm tired too. Lily set down the brush. Tired of pretending I'm going to be okay. Everyone wants me to be okay. The doctors, the teachers, Mommy. They all want me to smile and say I'm fine so they can feel better. But I'm not fine. And lying about it is exhausting. Then don't lie. But if I don't lie, they send more doctors, more people to talk at me about stages of grief and coping mechanisms and finding healthy outlets. Lily's voice turned bitter in a way no 7-year-old's voice should be. I don't want outlets. I don't want mechanisms. I want my daddy back, and no one can give me that. So why do they keep trying to give me other things I didn't ask for? Marcus did not have an answer. He sat with the question instead, letting it hang in the air between them. Unanswered and unanswerable. Marcus, yeah. Did you get angry after Daniel died? The question caught him off guard. He had been angry, furious actually, at the drunk driver, at God, at himself, at the universe's random cruelty. But he had pushed the anger down, buried it under guilt and grief until it festered into something toxic. I was angry at everything, at everyone, mostly at myself. Why yourself? Because I was driving, because I looked away, because if I had been paying attention for one more second, Daniel might still be alive. Lily absorbed this. Do you still blame yourself? Some days. What about the other days? Marcus considered the question seriously, the way Lily deserved. The other days, I just try to get through. 1 hour at a time. 1 minute at a time if it's a bad day. I tell myself that Daniel wouldn't want me to spend my whole life hating myself, that he'd want me to do something good even if I couldn't do good for him. Is that why you helped me to do something good? Partly, and partly because when I saw you on that ledge, I saw myself. I saw Daniel. I saw every kid who ever stood on an edge because the world hurt too much. And I thought if I couldn't save my own son, maybe I could save someone else's daughter. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, yeah, I'm glad you saw me. Say it. The second week, Victoria started joining them occasionally. Not every night, not intrusively, but sometimes she would appear in the doorway of Lily's room during one of Marcus's visits, hovering uncertainly like a guest in her own home. Lily noticed but did not comment. She continued her conversations with Marcus about Bear, about dinosaurs, about the unfairness of a world that took fathers away from daughters. But her eyes would flick to her mother, sometimes checking to see if Victoria was really there, really present, not just physically in the room, but emotionally available. One night, Victoria worked up the courage to sit down. She did not try to join the conversation, did not try to insert herself into the dynamic Marcus and Lily had built. She just sat on the floor near the door, watching, listening, learning the landscape of her daughter's inner world for the first time. Lily was telling Marcus about her father's helicopter, about how Jonathan had let her sit in the pilot's seat once when she was 5, about how the buttons and switches had seemed like magic to her. Daddy said the helicopter could go anywhere, above the clouds, over mountains, across the ocean. Lily's voice caught. He said one day he'd fly me to Paris because I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. Did he ever take you? No, he was going to, next summer. He said next summer we'd go to Paris and I could have croissants for breakfast and see the tower light up at night. Lily's chin trembled. But next summer came and he was dead, so I never saw Paris. I never had croissants. I never got to do any of the things he promised. Victoria made a small sound, almost involuntary. Lily turned to look at her mother. You didn't know about Paris, did you? Victoria shook her head, tears streaming. No, he never told me. Daddy had lots of plans he didn't tell you about. Because you were always working. He said Mommy carries the whole world on her shoulders, so we have to have our own adventures without making her carry those too. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. All the things she had missed, all the moments she had sacrificed for quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. Her husband had been building a secret life with their daughter, a fortress of memories and plans that excluded Victoria, because Victoria was never available. Never present, never anything but the CEO who happened to also be a mother. I'm sorry. Victoria's voice broke. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. Lily looked at her mother for a long moment, weighing something. Daddy said you love me in your way, that your way is different, but it's still love. He said you work so hard because you want to make the world safe for me. I tried to. I know, Mommy. Lily's voice was gentle, parental, almost a 7-year-old comforting her grown mother. But the world isn't safe. Daddy made me feel safe. Not the world you built, just Daddy. And now he's gone, and I don't feel safe anymore. Marcus watched the exchange, feeling like an intruder in something sacred and terrible. Mother and daughter facing each other across a chasm of grief and missed connections, trying to find a bridge. Can I? Victoria swallowed hard. Can I tell you something about your daddy? Something you might not know. Lily considered, then nodded. Your daddy used to write me letters, even after we got married, even after we lived in the same house. He would leave them on my pillow on nights when he knew I'd come home late from work. Little notes about his day, about you, about how much he loved us. Lily's eyes widened. I didn't know that. I kept them all, every single one. I have a box in my closet with hundreds of letters from your daddy. Victoria wiped her eyes. I haven't been able to open it since he died. I've been too afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that reading his words would make the emptiness bigger, that I'd fall in and never climb out. Lily looked at Marcus, then back at her mother. Marcus says the emptiness doesn't get smaller. You just learn to walk around it. Victoria's laugh was half sob. That's true, I'm still learning. Maybe, Lily hesitated, something young and hopeful flickering in her eyes. Maybe you could read me one of Daddy's letters sometime when you're ready. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. And maybe I could tell you about Paris, and the helicopter, and all the things Daddy and I were going to do. I would like that very much. It was the longest conversation Victoria and Lily had had since Jonathan's death. It was not healing, not yet, maybe not ever in the complete sense, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a window letting in light. Marcus stood quietly. I should go. Let you two talk. Lily looked up. You'll come back tomorrow. I'll come back tomorrow. Promise, promise, Marcus. He left mother and daughter sitting on the floor of Lily's room, beginning the slow work of learning to know each other again. In the elevator, he pressed his forehead against the cool metal wall and let himself feel what he had been holding back, the warmth of being needed, the terror of carrying the fragile hope that maybe after 10 years of darkness, he had found a reason to step into the light. The news broke on a Tuesday. Marcus was in his apartment drinking coffee that had gone cold, staring at the wall the way he often did when the night stretched too long and sleep would not come. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria Turn on Channel 7. Now. He found the remote, clicked to the local news channel, and watched his carefully constructed invisibility shatter. Billionaire Ashford CEO hires Janitor as daughter's personal therapist. The anchor announced, her voice dripping with the particular kind of scandal-mongering that passes for journalism in the 24-hour news cycle. Sources say Victoria Ashford, CEO of the $14 billion Ashford Pharmaceuticals, has hired a maintenance worker from her own building to counsel her 7-year-old daughter following a family tragedy. The screen filled with images: Ashford Tower's gleaming exterior, stock footage of Victoria at various corporate events, and then somehow impossibly a photo of Marcus himself taken from his company ID badge, his face gaunt and gray against the blue backdrop. Marcus Cole, 58, has worked as a night shift janitor at Ashford Tower for 6 years. Sources tell us he has no formal training in child psychology and a troubled past, including the loss of his own son in a car accident 10 years ago. They had Daniel's photo. Somehow they had found a photo of Daniel, his first grade school portrait, the one with the missing front tooth and the too big smile, the one that Marcus kept in his wallet but had not looked at in years because looking at it made the emptiness inside him grow teeth. Child welfare experts are expressing concern about this unorthodox arrangement. Dr. Patricia Moss, a child psychologist at Columbia University, had this to say. The screen cut to a woman in a professional blazer. Without knowing the specifics of this case, I can say that allowing an untrained individual with their own unresolved trauma to have unsupervised access to a vulnerable child raises serious questions. Grief requires professional intervention, not well-meaning amateurs. Marcus turned off the television. His phone buzzed again. Victoria, I'm sorry, I don't know how they got the story. I'm handling it. 3 floors below the penthouse, Victoria DeMonte watched the same broadcast with a glass of single malt scotch in her hand and a smile on her face. Kevin Marsh had outdone himself. The photos, the background information, the carefully worded concerns that painted Marcus Cole as a danger without crossing into actionable defamation, it was exactly what she needed. Her phone rang, Kevin's number. The story is running on every major outlet, he reported. I also reached out to a contact at CPS. They're going to receive an anonymous tip about the situation tomorrow morning. Excellent. What about the board members? I've already sent packages to Henderson, Wu, and Blackstone. Copies of Cole's employment record, his psychiatric history from the VA, the police report from the accident. Nothing illegal, just concerning. DeMonte took a sip of her scotch. And Victoria's response, she's scheduled a press conference for tomorrow afternoon, trying to get ahead of the narrative. Let her try. The narrative is already set. DeMonte turned to look out her window at the city lights below. A grieving mother making desperate, irrational decisions. A company without stable leadership. A board that needs to act to protect shareholder value. You really think this will be enough to remove her? Not immediately, but it's a crack in the foundation. Cracks spread. DeMonte finished her scotch and set the glass down. Keep me updated, and Kevin, make sure nothing traces back to me. Understood, Ms. DeMonte. She hung up and returned to watching the news coverage, watching Victoria's carefully constructed life begin to crumble one headline at a time. 15 years she had waited. A few more weeks would not matter. The next few days were chaos. News vans parked outside Ashford Tower. Reporters ambushed Victoria entering and leaving the building. Marcus stopped going out during daylight hours. Not that he went out much anyway, but now the few errands he needed to run, groceries, laundry, felt like running a gauntlet. Someone found his apartment building. They did not get inside. The superintendent refused to let them in, but they camped outside waiting for a glimpse of the man the tabloids had dubbed the Billionaire's janitor. Victoria held a press conference that Marcus watched from his darkened apartment, the blinds drawn against the cameras he imagined lurking everywhere. My daughter has suffered a devastating loss. Victoria stood behind a podium in Ashford Tower's lobby, her face composed but her hands gripping the edges with white-knuckled intensity. She lost her father 8 months ago. She stopped speaking. She stopped eating. Victoria's voice caught, and she had to pause before continuing. 9 licensed professionals failed to reach her. Then Marcus Cole sat down and talked to her, and she spoke. For the first time in 8 months, my daughter spoke. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Ashford, are you aware of Mr. Cole's history, that he abandoned his teaching position without notice, that he's been described by former colleagues as unstable?" "I'm aware of his history. I'm also aware that he lost his 6-year-old son in a car accident that he survived. I'm aware that his wife left him. I'm aware that he spent the last decade trying to disappear because the world became too painful to live in. And I'm aware that despite all of that pain, he saw my daughter on a ledge and didn't walk away. Is it appropriate for someone with documented mental health struggles to be counseling a child?" Victoria's eyes flashed. "Is it appropriate for licensed professionals to fail for 8 months while a child spirals towards suicide? Is it appropriate for everyone to have an opinion about what my daughter needs when they've never met her, never seen what she's been through, never watched their child go silent, and wondered every day if today would be the day she finally gave up?" The room went quiet. Marcus Cole is not a therapist. He is not a counselor. He is a man who understands what it means to lose someone you love, and he's willing to share that understanding with my daughter. If that makes him unqualified, then qualification is the wrong metric. I'd rather have an unqualified person who helps than a certified expert who doesn't. Marcus watched Victoria walk away from the podium, watched the reporters surge forward with more questions that went unanswered, and felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Gratitude, or something close to it. His phone rang, unknown number. He did not answer. He never answered unknown numbers. But when the voicemail notification popped up, he played it. "Mr. Cole, this is Douglas Mercer with Child Protective Services. We've received multiple complaints regarding your interaction with a minor child at Ashford Tower. We need to schedule an interview at your earliest convenience. Please call us back at..." Marcus deleted the message. Then he texted Victoria. "CPS called. Want me to disappear?" Her response came immediately. "Don't you dare. We fight this together." Together, as if they were a team, as if he was something other than a convenient tool for reaching her daughter. But Lily had asked for him every day since the night on the balcony. Lily had started eating again, started sleeping through the night, started drawing pictures of dinosaurs, because Bear likes dinosaurs and I want to make Bear happy. Lily was healing slowly, tentatively, the way broken things heal, when you don't force them back together but let them find their own shape. Marcus could not walk away from that. Not again. He had walked away from too much already. He texted back, "I'm not going anywhere." Child Protective Services sent 2 investigators. Rebecca Torres, a veteran social worker with tired eyes and sensible shoes, and Douglas Mercer, a younger man with the aggressive ambition of someone trying to make a name for himself on a high-profile case. They interviewed Marcus in Victoria's conference room, the 3 of them sitting around a table designed for negotiating million-dollar deals, now repurposed for interrogating a janitor about his relationship with a 7-year-old girl. "Mr. Cole, can you describe the nature of your relationship with Lily Ashford?" Douglas leaned forward, his tablet ready to record every word. "I talk to her. She talks to me. Sometimes we just sit in silence." Marcus kept his voice even. "She's a kid who lost her father. I'm someone who lost his son. We understand each other. You understand a 7-year-old girl. I understand grief. Grief doesn't come with an age requirement." Rebecca Torres spoke up, her tone gentler. "Mr. Cole, I've read your file. You lost your son Daniel in 2014. You left your teaching position without notice. You were effectively missing for 3 years after that. Can you help us understand what happened during that time?" Marcus stared at the table, at the polished wood that probably cost more than his annual salary from the janitor job. "I was trying to die without actually dying. Drinking too much, eating too little, taking risks that should have killed me but didn't. Eventually, I got tired of waiting for the universe to finish me off and decided to just exist. Minimum effort, minimum connection. A maintenance job that required nothing but showing up and moving a mop." Douglas jumped on that. "So you acknowledge you have a history of self-destructive behavior. I have a history of surviving when I didn't want to. Whether that's self-destructive or just tragic depends on your perspective. And now you're spending significant time with a vulnerable child, a child who was suicidal herself just weeks ago, a child who is speaking now, who is eating, who is sleeping through the night, who draws dinosaurs and tells me about her father's plans to take her to Paris. Marcus met Douglas's eyes. I didn't do anything magic. I just didn't lie to her. I didn't tell her the pain would go away. I told her the truth that some things hurt forever, and that's allowed, and she's not broken for feeling it. Rebecca made a note on her pad. The therapists Mrs. Ashford hired, they used evidence-based approaches to childhood grief. Why do you think your approach worked when theirs didn't? Because they were trying to fix her. I wasn't trying to do anything except be present. Marcus rubbed his face, suddenly exhausted. Kids know when you want something from them. They can tell when adults are performing, when the kindness has strings attached. Every therapist who came through that door wanted Lily to get better on their schedule according to their methods so they could feel successful. I don't need her to get better. I just need her to know she's not alone in the dark. Douglas made a skeptical noise. You don't think you're projecting your own issues onto this child, using her to process your unresolved grief over your son? The question hit Marcus like a punch. Because it was true. Partially anyway. He did see Daniel and Lily sometimes in the angle of her head when she concentrated on a drawing and the way she clutched Bear with the same ferocious protectiveness Daniel had shown toward his favorite toys. He did feel something healing inside himself. When Lily laughed when she ate a full meal, when she fell asleep without nightmares. Yes, Marcus's honesty surprised even himself. I probably am projecting some. I see my son in her, and that hurts, and sometimes helping her feels like getting a second chance I don't deserve. He paused. But here's the thing, Lily doesn't care about my psychological motivations. She cares about whether I show up, whether I tell the truth, whether I treat her like a person instead of a problem to be solved. And I do those things. Whatever else is going on in my head, I do those things. Rebecca and Douglas exchanged a look. Mr. Cole, we're going to recommend continued monitoring of this situation, Rebecca said finally. That means follow-up interviews, check-ins with Lily, assessments of her well-being. We're not going to remove you from her life, not based on what we've seen so far, but we are going to be watching. Watch all you want. I'm not hiding anything. Douglas looked like he wanted to argue, but Rebecca stood, ending the interview. Thank you for your time, Mr. Cole. We'll be in touch. After they left, Victoria emerged from the adjoining room where she had been listening through the glass. You were honest with them. Lying wouldn't have helped. No, but you could have been less honest. You didn't have to admit that you're projecting onto Lily. They would have figured it out anyway. Better to own it than let them think I'm unaware. Victoria sat down across from him, the same seat Rebecca Torres had occupied. Do you really see Daniel in her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes. Not her face, Lily doesn't look anything like Daniel. But her grief, the way she carries it, the way it shapes everything she does. I know that weight. I've been carrying my own version of it for 10 years. He looked at Victoria. Does that bother you, that part of what I'm doing is selfish? Victoria considered the question seriously. Everything people do is partly selfish. I'm not naive enough to think pure altruism exists. The question is whether the selfishness produces harm or healing. And the answer is that Lily drew a picture yesterday, a picture of Bear and a dinosaur in a helicopter. She hasn't drawn in 8 months. She hasn't touched her art supplies since Jonathan died. And yesterday she asked for markers and paper and spent 2 hours creating a world where her father's helicopter takes Bear and a T-Rex to see the Eiffel Tower. Victoria's eyes were bright. I don't care if you're projecting. I don't care if helping Lily helps you work through your own grief. I care about results. And the results are that my daughter is coming back to life. The CPS investigation closed 2 weeks later with a recommendation for continued monitoring, but no further action. That night they celebrated. Victoria ordered pizza, something she had not done since Jonathan died, something that felt too normal, too happy for a house that was supposed to be in mourning. Lily ate 3 slices, the most she had eaten at one meal in 8 months. Marcus sat on the floor of her room afterward, watching her add new locations to the map she was making of all the places Bear wanted to visit. The dinosaur museum goes here, Lily said, drawing a careful rectangle. And this is the park where Daddy used to take me. And this is Central Park Zoo because Bear wants to meet real bears and say hi. That's a lot of places. Bear has been sad for a long time. Bear deserves adventures. Victoria appeared in the doorway, a glass of wine in her hand and an expression of peace on her face that Marcus had never seen before. "We won," she said, the first genuine smile crossing her face since Jonathan's death. "CPS is backing off. The press is moving on to other scandals. We won." Marcus looked at her, at the relief in her eyes, and wanted to warn her. Wanted to say that victories in this world were usually just pauses between battles, that peace had a way of announcing itself as permanent right before it shattered. But Lily was smiling and Victoria was smiling, and for one night he decided to let them have this. "To winning," Victoria said, raising her glass. Marcus nodded, but something uncomfortable settled in his stomach. He had learned through a decade of loss that happiness was often just the universe loading its next round. 17 days later, he would remember this moment and wish he had spoken the warning aloud. The calm lasted exactly 17 days. Marcus should have known better than to trust it. Peace had a way of announcing itself as permanent right before it shattered, like a window gleaming in sunlight the moment before the stone came through. He had learned that lesson 10 years ago on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when the radio was playing and Daniel was talking about dinosaurs and everything was fine until it wasn't. The call came at 6:47 in the morning, too early for good news. Victoria's voice was controlled in that particular way that meant she was barely holding herself together. "There's a problem. A big one. I need you to come to the office." Marcus was already reaching for his jacket. "What kind of problem?" "The kind with lawyers." He found Victoria in her conference room, surrounded by people in expensive suits who all stopped talking when he walked in. The silence had weight to it, the kind that settles over a room when everyone knows something terrible and no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. Victoria gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Marcus. You need to hear this." Margaret Chen, Victoria's lead attorney, slid a document across the table. "Mr. Cole, this was filed in family court this morning. It's a petition challenging Mrs. Ashford's fitness as a parent, specifically citing her decision to allow you unsupervised access to Lily." Marcus picked up the document. The legal language swam before his eyes, but certain phrases jumped out. Reckless endangerment of a minor. Pattern of negligent decision-making. Immediate intervention required to protect the child's welfare. "Who filed this?" Margaret exchanged a glance with Victoria. "Technically, it was filed by a group calling themselves the Coalition for Child Safety. They're a nonprofit advocacy organization." "And not technically," Victoria's jaw tightened. "Victoria DeMonte. She's been funding the coalition for years through shell companies. It's her attack dog, and she just pointed it at my family." Marcus set down the document. He had heard about DeMonte in fragments over the past weeks. The ambitious board member, the rival waiting for Victoria to stumble, the shark circling in increasingly tight circles. But he had not expected this. Had not expected the attack to come at Lily. "What does this mean?" "In practical terms," Margaret leaned forward, "it means there will be a hearing. A judge will review the evidence, hear testimony from both sides, and decide whether Mrs. Ashford's parenting decisions constitute grounds for intervention." Intervention, meaning what? Meaning, in the worst case, Lily could be removed from her mother's custody, placed with a court-appointed guardian while the investigation continues. Margaret's voice was carefully neutral. "That's the worst case. More likely, the court will impose conditions, supervised visitation with you, mandatory therapy with a licensed professional, regular check-ins with CPS." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him. "This is because of me. Because I'm not qualified. Because I have... This is because Victoria DeMonte wants to destroy my credibility so she can take over my company." Victoria's voice cut through his spiral. "You're just the weapon she chose. If it wasn't you, it would be something else. A business decision she could spin as reckless. A public statement she could twist into evidence of instability. She's been waiting for an opening for years, and I gave her one. By trusting me. By doing what was right for my daughter. I won't apologize for that." That same morning, Victoria DeMonte sat in her office reviewing the legal filing with her personal attorney, a thin man named Crawford who specialized in making problems disappear. The hearing is set for next Tuesday, Crawford said. Judge Harrison, she's thorough but fair. Fair is not what we need. Damani turned to her window, watching the city wake up below. Fair might let Victoria keep the janitor around. Fair might decide that an unconventional arrangement isn't the same as a dangerous one. What would you prefer? I would prefer a judge who understands that a CEO who can't make sound decisions about her own daughter can't be trusted to make sound decisions about a $14 billion company. DeMonte's voice was cold, precise. I want the board to see Victoria as unstable, emotionally compromised, unfit for leadership. Crawford made a note. The psychiatric evaluation of Mr. Cole could help with that. If we can establish that he's mentally unstable, he's not unstable, he's damaged. DeMonte turned to face her attorney. There's a difference. Unstable people are unpredictable. Damaged people are predictable. They act out of their wounds. Cole's wound is obvious, his dead son. Everything he does for that little girl is an attempt to heal a wound that can't be healed. That could work against us. A judge might find it sympathetic. A judge might. A board of directors won't. DeMonte sat down behind her desk. This isn't about winning the custody hearing. This is about creating enough chaos that the board loses confidence in Victoria. The hearing is just one front in a larger war. And the other fronts? DeMonte smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Already in motion. I have a meeting with Henderson Wu and Blackstone tomorrow. 3 board members who are already nervous about the company's direction. 3 votes that could swing a confidence measure. You think you can remove her as CEO? I think Victoria is about to discover that protecting her daughter and protecting her company require opposite strategies. She can't do both. DeMonte's smile widened. And when she has to choose, she'll make the choice any mother would make, which is the choice that will cost her everything. The psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for 3 days before the hearing. Marcus had expected it, part of the court's process. Margaret explained standard procedure in custody disputes involving third parties. What he had not expected was the thoroughness of it, the way the psychiatrist peeled back layers he had spent a decade trying to bury. Dr. Samuel Okonkwo was 63 years old with gray hair and glasses, in a manner that suggested he had heard every variety of human pain and remained somehow compassionate despite it. His office was warm, cluttered with books and plants deliberately designed to feel unlike the institutional spaces where people usually confronted their worst moments. Mr. Cole, I've reviewed your history, the accident, the loss of your son, the dissolution of your marriage. Balocho Okonkwo's voice was gentle. I'd like to hear about it in your own words. Marcus had told the story before to the CPS investigators, to Victoria, to Lily, in fragments she could understand. But this felt different. This was not recounting facts. This was excavation. I was driving. Daniel was in the passenger seat. He was telling me about dinosaurs, about how T-Rex couldn't actually roar, that scientists think they made sounds like crocodiles. Marcus paused, and even now, 10 years later, he could hear Daniel's voice, high and excited and full of wonder at the world. I reached for the radio dial, just for a second. I wanted to find a song my wife liked. And in that second, a drunk driver ran a red light, doing 60. What happened next? I don't remember the impact, just waking up in the hospital 2 days later. They told me Daniel died at the scene. They told me the driver got 8 years. Marcus's hands were steady, but inside he felt the familiar tremor, the earthquake that never quite stopped. 8 years for killing my son. I got a lifetime. You blame yourself. I was responsible for him. I was supposed to protect him. And I looked away. Dr. Okonkwo made a note. Your wife left after the accident. Sarah couldn't look at me without seeing Daniel, without seeing the moment I looked away. She said being married to me was like living with a ghost and a murderer at the same time. Marcus exhaled slowly. She wasn't wrong. Do you still believe that you're a murderer? The question hung in the air. Marcus had asked himself the same thing countless times, in the dark hours before dawn, in the endless nights, pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways. I believe I made a choice that resulted in my son's death. Whether that makes me a murderer or just unlucky, I don't know anymore. I don't know if the distinction matters. Have you had thoughts of harming yourself since the accident? Marcus met the psychiatrist's eyes. Yes, there was a period, 3 years, maybe 4, when I thought about it constantly. Planned it out. Chose methods. I stood on the Brooklyn Bridge one night for 3 hours, watching the water holding Bear, because I couldn't figure out what else to do with him. What stopped you? I couldn't figure out what to do with Bear, Daniel's stuffed animal. I couldn't take it with me and couldn't leave it behind. So I just stood there until the sun came up, and then I went home. Marcus laughed, and there was no humor in it. A stuffed animal saved my life. Not some profound realization, not therapy, a ratty little bear with a loose eye. And now, do you still have thoughts of self-harm? Marcus considered the question carefully. Sometimes the thoughts come. On bad days when the memories hit hard, but they're different now. Quieter. Less like commands and more like echoes from a room I used to live in. What changed, Lily? The name came out soft. I was invisible for 10 years. No one saw me, no one needed me, no one would have noticed if I disappeared. Then I walked into a room where a little girl was standing on a ledge, and she looked at me like I was real, like I mattered. And something woke up. Dr. Okonkwo wrote for a long moment. Mr. Cole, I'm going to be direct with you. My evaluation will carry significant weight in the upcoming hearing. I need to assess whether your involvement with Lily Ashford represents a benefit to her well-being or a risk. I know. Tell me about your relationship with her, not the official version, the real one. Marcus thought about Lily's map, about the letters from her father, about the way she held Bear when she was scared, and the way she smiled when Marcus kept his promises. She's not my daughter, I know that. Daniel is gone and Lily isn't a replacement for him. She's herself, her own person, with her own grief and her own way of carrying it. Marcus paused. But when I'm with her, I remember what it felt like to be needed. To be the person someone trusts. To matter in that specific way that only matters to one specific person. Some would say that's unhealthy, that you're using a child to fill a void in yourself. Some would be right. Marcus did not flinch from the accusation. Part of what I feel for Lily is selfish. Part of why I show up every day is because showing up makes me feel less empty. But here's the thing, she needs someone to show up. She needs someone who understands what it's like to carry absence like a weight in your chest. And I'm that person. Whatever my motivations, I'm the one who sits with her in the dark. Does that justify the relationship? I don't know if anything justifies anything. I just know that Lily is eating again, sleeping again, drawing dinosaurs and making maps and talking about visiting the ocean where her father's helicopter went down. Marcus's voice roughened. Before I came along, she was standing on a ledge wanting to die. Now she's making plans for the future. Whether that's because of me or despite me, I can't say. But I won't walk away from her. Not unless someone proves I'm making things worse. Dr. Okonkwo set down his pen. Mr. Cole, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen every kind of damage a human being can inflict on themselves and others. And what I see in you is not a predator or an opportunist or a man using a child to satisfy his own needs. What I see is a man who broke and spent a decade trying to disappear and who found a reason to be visible again. Marcus waited. I'm going to recommend to the court that your relationship with Lily be allowed to continue with appropriate monitoring. I believe you present a benefit to her recovery, not a risk. Dr. Okonkwo stood. But I'm also going to recommend that you continue therapy yourself, not court-mandated voluntary. Because the work you've started with Lily has opened doors in yourself that have been closed for a long time, and you need someone to help you navigate what comes through. I can do that. Good. Dr. Okonkwo extended his hand. Whatever happens in that courtroom, Mr. Cole, remember, healing isn't linear. There will be setbacks. There will be days when the old darkness feels closer than the new light. But you've proven you can survive those days. You've proven it for 10 years. Don't let anyone tell you that survival isn't enough. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Victoria's legal team had prepared exhaustively binders of documentation, lists of witnesses, rehearsed responses to every possible question. They had character testimonials from Lily's teachers who had noticed remarkable improvement in her engagement and participation. They had medical records showing weight gain, improved sleep patterns, reduced anxiety symptoms. They had Dr. Okonkwo's evaluation, which Margaret called the best-case scenario for our side. What they could not prepare for was Victoria de Monte herself. Marcus saw her for the first time in the courthouse hallway a woman in her late 50s with silver hair in the kind of expensive suit that telegraphed power. She moved through the crowd of lawyers and journalists with the ease of someone who had won battles in these halls before, who knew exactly how the system worked and how to bend it to her will. Their eyes met for a brief moment. DeMonte smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had already tasted blood. "Don't engage with her." Victoria's voice was tight. "That's what she wants, a reaction she can use." "I wasn't planning to." "Good. Let the lawyers handle it. Our job is to be calm, credible, and focused on Lily's well-being." The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had expected. No jury box. This was a family court matter decided by a single judge. Judge Eleanor Harrison, according to Margaret, was known for being thorough and fair, more interested in children's welfare than legal technicalities. That was supposed to be good news. Marcus sat behind Victoria's legal team, watching as the opposing counsel laid out their case. The lawyer was young, aggressive, hungry, in the way lawyers were when they wanted to make a name for themselves. He painted Marcus as a troubled man with a history of mental instability, a flight risk who had abandoned his teaching position without notice of potential danger to a vulnerable child already traumatized by loss. Every word was technically accurate. Every word was designed to make Marcus look like a monster. Then it was time for Marcus to testify. He walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The oath was administered, and he sat down, and suddenly he was looking at a room full of strangers who would decide whether he got to keep the promises he had made to a 7-year-old girl. Victoria's lawyer, Margaret, approached first. "Mr. Cole, can you describe your first encounter with Lily Ashford?" Marcus told the story: the balcony, the ledge, the stuffed bear, the moment Lily spoke for the first time in 8 months. He tried to keep his voice steady, tried to present himself as the calm, stable person the court needed to see. But partway through, he looked at Victoria in the gallery and saw her crying silently, and something cracked in his professional composure. "Mr. Cole, critics have suggested that your involvement with Lily is inappropriate given your own unresolved trauma. How do you respond to that?" Marcus took a breath. "They're not wrong that I have unresolved trauma. I lost my son 10 years ago, and I will carry that loss until the day I die. It doesn't resolve, it doesn't heal completely. It just becomes part of who you are, like a scar that aches when the weather changes." He looked at the judge. "But here's what those critics need to understand: that scar is exactly why I could reach Lily when the professionals couldn't. Not in spite of my trauma, because of it. I know what it's like to stand on an edge. I know what it's like to want the pain to stop so badly that stopping everything seems like the only option. And I know what it's like to need someone who won't try to fix you, who will just sit with you in the darkness and say, 'I understand.' Do you believe you're qualified to help Lily?" "No, I'm not qualified by any professional standard. I have no degrees, no certifications, no training in child psychology. I'm a man who cleans floors and carries around his dead son's stuffed animal because he can't let go." Marcus's voice roughened. "But I'm also the man who was there when Lily needed someone. The man who shows up every day even when showing up hurts. The man who tells her the truth when everyone else is lying about how grief works." Margaret nodded. No further questions. Then DeMonte's lawyer stood up. "Mr. Cole, you testified that you stood on the Brooklyn Bridge contemplating suicide. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you've had ongoing thoughts of self-harm in the years since?" "Yes, though they've diminished significantly." "Diminished but not disappeared." "Correct." The lawyer paced. "Mr. Cole, you walked out on 23 first graders in the middle of a school year. You abandoned children who trusted you, who looked up to you, who needed you. Is that also correct?" Marcus felt the old shame rise in his chest. "Yes." "And now you're asking this court to believe that you won't do the same thing to Lily Ashford, that you won't decide one day that your pain is too much and simply disappear, leaving another child wondering what she did wrong." The question hung in the courtroom like a blade. Marcus thought about those 23 children, thought about their faces when he walked out, the confusion that must have become hurt, that must have become abandonment. He had tried not to think about them for years, had told himself that his absence was better than his presence, that a teacher who could not function was worse than no teacher at all. But standing in this courtroom with Lily's future hanging in the balance, he could not hide behind those rationalizations anymore. What I did to those children was wrong. There's no excuse for it. I was broken, and instead of getting help, I ran. I caused harm to people who trusted me, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. He looked at the judge. But I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. I've had to become something else just to survive. And part of that survival means keeping promises even when keeping them is hard. I promised Lily I wouldn't leave. I intend to keep that promise. Even if keeping it means exposing a vulnerable child to your ongoing mental health struggles. Even then, because Lily needs someone who understands those struggles. She needs to see that you can be broken and still show up, that you can carry terrible weight and still move forward, that survival isn't about being healed, it's about refusing to quit. The lawyer smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Mr. Cole, you've made a compelling case for yourself as a wounded healer. But here's my concern: wounded healers sometimes wound others. They project their own trauma onto the people they're trying to help. They use relationships to fill voids in themselves rather than genuinely serving the other person's needs. That's possible. So you admit that your relationship with Lily could be harmful. I admit that anything could be harmful. Any relationship carries risk. The question is whether the potential benefit outweighs the potential harm. Marcus leaned forward slightly. For 8 months, the licensed professionals worked with Lily, the people with degrees and certifications and years of training, and she got worse. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She stopped living. Then I sat down with her and told her the truth about grief, and she started to come back. He shook his head. I'm not claiming to be better than the experts. I'm just saying I'm what worked. And unless you can show me that I've harmed Lily in some concrete way, I don't see the point of removing something that's helping just because it doesn't fit into the expected categories. The judge called a recess. Marcus sat in the hallway, his head in his hands, replaying every answer he had given. Had he said too much? Not enough. Had his honesty about his mental health struggles hurt his case or helped it? Victoria sat down beside him. You did well. Did I? You told the truth. That's all anyone can do. The truth might not be enough. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Marcus, whatever happens in there, whatever the judge decides, I want you to know that you changed our lives, mine and Lily's. Regardless of what any court says, that's real. That matters. Marcus looked at her. What if they take her from you? What if they use me as the reason? Then I'll fight. I'll appeal. I'll spend every dollar I have and burn every bridge I need to burn. Victoria's voice was steel. But they won't win. They can't win. Because what we have isn't a legal arrangement. It's a family. A strange, broken, unconventional family, but a family nonetheless. Before Marcus could respond, Margaret approached. The judge wants you to speak with Lily, privately in chambers. It's standard procedure in these cases. Hear from the child directly without parental influence. Victoria's face tightened. She's 7 years old. I know, but Judge Harrison is good with children. And honestly, Lily might be our strongest witness. They brought Lily in through a side entrance away from the cameras and reporters. She was wearing her elephant pajamas, the ones Jonathan had mended because she had refused to change out of them that morning. She carried Bear in her arms like a shield. Marcus knelt down to her level. Hey, kiddo, how are you holding up? Lily's eyes were wide but steady. The lady with the big chair wants to talk to me. That's right, Judge Harrison. She's nice. She just wants to ask you some questions about how you're feeling. Are you in trouble? Marcus hesitated. He had promised never to lie to her. Some people think I shouldn't spend time with you. They think I might be bad for you. That's stupid. Lily's voice was indignant. You're not bad for me. You're the best thing that happened since Daddy died. Victoria made a choke sound. Can you tell the judge that? Marcus asked. Can you tell her how you really feel, even if it's hard? Lily nodded solemnly. I'll tell her the truth. That's what you taught me, that the truth is better than lies, even when the truth is scary. She walked toward the chambers with a court-appointed advocate, Bear clutched against her chest, looking smaller and braver than any 7-year-old should have to look. The waiting was unbearable. Marcus paced the hallway. Victoria sat rigidly in a chair, her phone buzzing with messages she did not answer. Margaret reviewed her notes for the 20th time. The minutes stretched like hours, each one filled with the terrible possibility of loss. Finally, the door opened. Lily emerged first, running straight to Marcus and throwing her arms around his legs. He lifted her up, held her close, felt her small heart beating against his chest. What happened? Victoria was on her feet. What did you tell her? Lily looked at her mother. I told her the truth, that Marcus is my friend, that he doesn't lie to me about Daddy being dead, that when I'm with him, the emptiness in my chest doesn't hurt as much. Victoria's eyes welled with tears. What else? I told her that if they take Marcus away, I'll stop talking again. Forever this time. Because if the world doesn't let me keep the people who help me, then what's the point of talking to the world? The advocate looked at Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. Your daughter is remarkably articulate, Mrs. Ashford, and remarkably clear about what she needs. She gets that from her father. They filed back into the courtroom for the judge's ruling. Judge Harrison looked tired, but there was something in her eyes that gave Marcus hope, a softening maybe, or a recognition of something beyond the legal technicalities. This is an unusual case, the judge began. On one hand, we have legitimate concerns about the involvement of an unlicensed individual with documented mental health struggles in the care of a traumatized child. On the other hand, we have documented evidence that this involvement has produced positive outcomes where professional intervention failed. She shuffled her papers. I've spoken with the child. I've reviewed the psychiatric evaluation. I've heard testimony from both sides. And I've come to a conclusion. The courtroom held its breath. The petition to challenge Mrs. Ashford's parental fitness is denied. Victoria sagged with relief. Marcus felt his legs go weak. However, Judge Harrison continued, I am ordering certain conditions. Mr. Cole will continue meeting with a therapist of his choosing and provide quarterly reports to the court on his mental health status. His interactions with Lily Ashford will be documented through regular check-ins with a court-appointed social worker. And if at any point evidence emerges that this arrangement is causing harm to the child, I will revisit this ruling. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Cole, I don't know if what you're doing is therapy or friendship or something that doesn't have a name, but I know that child spoke to me about you with more love and trust than I've seen in most biological families. Don't betray that trust. Don't make me regret this decision. I won't, Your Honor. See that you don't. The gavel fell. They won, but the victory felt hollow. In the car on the way home, Victoria stared out the window at the city scrolling past. DeMonte will keep coming, she said finally. The board meeting is Thursday. She has enough votes to call for a confidence measure. What does that mean? It means the board will vote on whether I should continue as CEO. If I lose, I'm out. And DeMonte takes over everything my family built. Marcus looked at Lily asleep in the back seat with Bear tucked under her chin. What are you going to do? Victoria was silent for a long moment. Whatever I have to. Whatever it takes to protect my daughter and my company. In that order, Victoria turned to look at him and her eyes held something he could not quite read. Ask me again after the board meeting. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. Victoria spent the days leading up to it in a state of controlled fury, working phones and calling in favors and doing all the things that powerful people do when their power is threatened. Marcus watched from the periphery, understanding that this was a battle he could not fight for her, a world where his presence would only make things worse. But he could be there for Lily. That much at least was still his to give. The night before the board meeting, he found her in her room, not drawing or playing, just sitting on her bed with Bear in her lap, staring at the wall. Hey, kiddo, what's going on in that head of yours? Lily did not look at him. Mommy is scared. She doesn't say it, but I can tell. She has her scared face on the one she thinks nobody sees. Marcus sat down on the floor across from her, his usual spot. Your mommy is dealing with some difficult grown-up stuff, but she's strong. She'll figure it out. What if she doesn't? What if the bad people win and take everything away? The question cut deep. Marcus thought about all the times the bad people had won in his own life. The drunk driver who killed Daniel and got only 8 years, the grief that took Sarah away, the darkness that had swallowed a decade of his existence. Sometimes bad people do win. That's the truth, and I promised I'd always tell you the truth. He paused. But here's the other truth. Even when bad people win, good people find ways to keep going. They lose battles and still survive. They get knocked down and figure out how to stand up again. Lily finally looked at him. Is that what you did after Daniel? It took me a long time. Too long, probably, but yes. Eventually, I figured out how to stand up again. Marcus reached out and touched her hand. And you know what helped me the most? What? Finding someone worth standing up for. Lily's eyes glistened. Me, you. She crawled off the bed and into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Marcus held her, this child who had become his anchor without him ever planning it, and he made a silent promise to whatever forces governed the universe. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever battles were won or lost, he would not let this little girl face the darkness alone. Harrison Ashford arrived at Victoria's penthouse at 7 o'clock that evening. He looked worse than Marcus had ever seen him. The persistent cough that had plagued him for months had deepened into something rattling and wet, and his skin had taken on a grayish pallor that spoke of more than simple fatigue. But his eyes were sharp and his handshake was still firm. "I came to help," Harrison said, settling into a chair in Victoria's living room. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you need to know you're not alone in this fight." Victoria's expression softened. "Dad, you should be resting. You sound terrible." "I've been resting for 5 years, watching from the sidelines while my company—" He stopped, caught himself. "While your company faced challenges I should have helped you with." Harrison looked at Marcus, then back at his daughter. "I've made mistakes. I spent so much time building Ashford Pharmaceuticals that I forgot to build the things that matter more. My family, my relationships, the legacy that doesn't show up on a balance sheet." "Dad, let me finish." Harrison's voice was rough but determined. "I've talked to Henderson, Wu, and Blackstone. Reminded them of a few things they seem to have forgotten. Deals I made possible for them. Favors they owe. The fact that Victoria has increased shareholder value by 40% since she took over, despite losing her husband and dealing with a family crisis that would have destroyed lesser people." Victoria stared at her father. "You've been lobbying the board." "I've been protecting my family, something I should have done more of when it actually mattered." Harrison coughed again, the sound deep and painful. "DeMonte thinks she has the votes, but she's wrong. I've been in this game longer than she has, and I know where the bodies are buried." Marcus watched the exchange, feeling like an observer at a war council for a war he could not fight. But he understood what Harrison was doing, the same thing Marcus had done on that balcony, the same thing he did every night in Lily's room. Showing up, being present, refusing to let the people he loved face the darkness alone. "There's something else," Harrison said, his voice dropping. "I went to the doctor last week. The cough isn't just a cough." Victoria's face went pale. "Dad, what are you saying?" "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They're giving me 6 months, maybe less." Harrison held up his hand as Victoria started to speak. "I'm not telling you this to make you kid or to distract from tomorrow. I'm telling you because I've wasted too much time already, and I won't waste any more." The room fell silent. Marcus could see Victoria struggling to process the board meeting, her father's illness, everything piling up at once. "I've drafted a letter to the board," Harrison continued, "to be read if DeMonte's confidence measure passes. It outlines certain irregularities in her business dealings over the years. Things I've known about but never had reason to use." He smiled, but it was the smile of a man who had made peace with his own mortality. "Sometimes the best weapon is one you never have to fire, but knowing it exists can change the outcome of a battle." Victoria crossed the room and knelt beside her father's chair, taking his hands in hers. "I don't care about the board meeting. I care about you." "I know. That's why you're a better person than I ever was." Harrison looked at Marcus. "You understand what I'm doing, don't you? Why I'm telling her this now?" Marcus nodded slowly. "You're giving her permission to choose." "Exactly. The company or the family. The CEO or the daughter. DeMonte thinks she can force Victoria into an impossible position. But there's no impossible position when you know what really matters." Harrison squeezed Victoria's hands. "Whatever you decide tomorrow, Ace, I'll support you. If you want to fight for the company, I'll fight beside you. If you want to walk away and focus on Lily, I'll understand. But the choice has to be yours." Victoria looked at her father, then at Marcus, then at the hallway that led to Lily's room. "I think I already know what I'm going to choose," she said quietly. "I've known since the night Lily stood on that ledge." The board meeting lasted 4 hours. Marcus was not there, could not be there, but Victoria called him the moment it ended, her voice carrying the particular flatness of someone who has absorbed a blow and has not yet decided how to feel about it. They voted me out, 8-4. DeMonte is the new CEO. Marcus closed his eyes. Victoria, I'm sorry. Don't be, I knew it was coming. I've known for weeks, really. The writing was on the wall the moment I chose Lily over the company. What happened to your father's letter? I asked him not to use it. Victoria's laugh was brittle. He was ready to destroy DeMonte, all the leverage he'd been holding for years. But I told him no. I told him I didn't want to win that way. I didn't want to keep a position I'd have to defend through blackmail and old grudges. So you just let her take it. I let myself lose. There's a difference, Victoria's voice softened. I keep my shares 34%, enough to be a thorn in DeMonte's side for years if I want to be. I take the severance package and the non-compete clause and walk away from the thing I spent 20 years building. How do you feel? There was a long pause. Lighter. Isn't that strange? I thought losing would feel like dying, but it feels like waking up, like I've been holding my breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. What happens now? Now I figure out who I am when I'm not CEO of Ashford Pharmaceuticals. Now I be Lily's mother. Really her mother, not just the person who pays the bills and hires the help. Victoria's voice shifted, something new entering it, something that sounded almost like hope. And I want to do something meaningful, something that matters more than stock prices and quarterly reports. Any ideas? Actually, yes, but I want to talk to you about it in person. Can you come over tonight? I'll be there. Victoria's idea was ambitious, idealistic, and exactly the kind of thing that made Marcus's heart ache, with something he had almost forgotten, how to feel hope. A foundation, Victoria explained, spreading papers across her dining table. Lily was asleep in her room, and the penthouse was quiet in that particular way that late nights make spaces quiet, full of potential, waiting for something to fill it. Not a charity that writes checks and holds galas, a real foundation that does real work. Connecting grieving children with adults who understand their loss. Not therapy, not counseling, just presence. The thing you gave Lily. Marcus stared at the preliminary plans, organizational structures, funding models, pilot program outlines. Victoria had clearly been thinking about this for longer than the board meeting, preparing for the possibility of defeat by building something that could rise from the ashes. You want to replicate what happened with Lily. I want to scale it. There are thousands of children like her kids who've lost parents to accidents, illness, violence. And there are thousands of adults like you, people carrying grief they don't know how to use. What if we brought them together? I'm not sure it can be systematized. What happened with Lily wasn't a method, it was just connection. I know, and that's exactly why it needs to exist. The mental health system treats grief like a disease to be cured. We'd treat it like a weight to be shared. Victoria's eyes were bright with something Marcus had not seen in her before: passion divorced from profit, purpose divorced from power. We'd train people, not to be therapists, but to be witnesses, to sit with the children in the dark and say, I've been there too. Marcus thought about all the nights he had spent pushing his cleaning cart through empty hallways, invisible and alone, carrying a grief that no one ever asked about. He thought about what it might have meant to have someone see that grief, acknowledge it, help him transform it into something useful. What would you call it? Victoria smiled. I was thinking Daniel's light, if you'd allow it. Marcus's throat closed. His son's name attached to something that might help other children survive what Daniel had not. It was almost too much to hold. Daniel would have liked that. He always wanted to help people. Used to share his lunch with kids who forgot theirs. Used to bring home stray animals and beg us to keep them. Marcus's voice caught. He had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Then we'll build it in his honor, and in Jonathan's, and in honor of every child who's ever stood on a ledge wondering if anyone would notice if they fell. They worked through the night sketching plans and possibilities, and for the first time in 10 years, Marcus felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. The foundation launched 6 months later. Victoria poured her severance package into the initial funding, supplemented by donations from other wealthy families who had lost children to the particular darkness that grief can bring. They found a space in Brooklyn, a converted warehouse with high ceilings and natural light designed to feel nothing like the institutional settings where grieving people usually found themselves. The walls were painted in soft colors. The furniture was comfortable, chosen for sitting close and talking quietly. There were rooms for art therapy spaces for quiet reflection, a small garden where children could plant things and watch them grow. Everything was designed to say, this is a place where pain is welcome. This is a place where grief has permission to exist. Marcus became the director of volunteer training, not because he had any qualifications, but because he understood in a bone-deep way what the volunteers needed to learn how to be present without trying to fix how to tell the truth, without offering false hope, how to carry someone else's pain without drowning in your own. The first class of volunteers included 32 people, each one carrying their own loss. A mother whose teenage son had died of an overdose, a father whose daughter had been killed by a drunk driver. Marcus found a particular kinship with him, two men bound by the specific guilt of survivors. A grandmother who had raised her grandchildren after their parents died in a car crash. A young man who had lost his sister to suicide and spent years blaming himself for not seeing the signs. A retired firefighter who had carried the bodies of children out of burning buildings and never stopped seeing their faces. Marcus stood before them on the first day of training, feeling inadequate and necessary in equal measure. "I'm not going to teach you techniques," he began. "I'm not going to give you scripts to follow or methods to apply. What I'm going to teach you is how to be present, how to sit with someone in pain and not try to make the pain go away." He looked around the room at faces that reflected his own grief back at him. "The children you'll work with have heard every platitude. Time heals all wounds. They're in a better place. Everything happens for a reason." Those phrases don't help. They make grieving children feel like their pain is wrong, like they should be further along in some imaginary healing process. Marcus paused. What helps is honesty. What helps is someone saying, yes, this is terrible. Yes, you have every right to be angry. Yes, the world is unfair, and your loss is real, and nothing will ever make it completely okay. What helps is knowing you're not alone in the dark. A woman raised her hand, the mother who had lost her son to overdose. How do we do that without projecting our own grief onto them? We don't avoid projecting, we acknowledge it. We say, I lost someone too. I know what this feels like. And I'm here because I needed someone to sit with me in my dark place and no one did. I'm here so you don't have to be alone like I was. Marcus took a breath. The children will know if you're being honest. They'll know if you're performing compassion versus actually feeling it. So don't perform. Just be present. Be real. Let them see your scars so they know their own scars are survivable. The training lasted 6 weeks. They covered practical matters, how to recognize signs of crisis, when to escalate to professional help, how to maintain appropriate boundaries. But the core curriculum was something that could not be taught from a textbook: the art of sitting with pain, the discipline of presence, the courage to tell the truth when lies would be easier. By the end, Marcus had learned as much from the volunteers as they had learned from him. Stories of loss and survival that expanded his understanding of how many ways there were to break and how many ways there were to keep going despite being broken. The first matches were made carefully. Children were paired with adults who had experienced similar losses. Kids who lost fathers matched with adults who had lost children. Kids who lost mothers to cancer matched with adults who had survived the same disease in their families. Kids who had witnessed traumatic deaths matched with adults who understood that particular flavor of PTSD. The results were not always successful. Some matches did not click. Some volunteers found that being present with a grieving child was harder than they had anticipated, reopening wounds they thought had healed. Some children resisted connection, too damaged to trust another adult. But enough of it worked. Enough children started talking, started eating, started sleeping through the night. Enough small miracles accumulated to prove that Victoria's idea had merit, that grief shared was grief lightened, even if only by fractions. Within the first year, Daniel's Light had served 147 families. On Lily's 18th birthday, they threw a party at the foundation. Other children from the program came along with their volunteer companions. There was cake shaped like a T-Rex, Lily's new obsession inherited from Daniel, through Bear's stories and games designed for kids who understood loss and adults who had learned to share it. Marcus watched Lily blow out the candles, surrounded by children who understood her in ways other kids never could, and felt something expand in his chest that he had thought was permanently contracted. "Make a wish," Victoria said. Lily closed her eyes for a long moment and then opened them. "I wish that everyone who's sad could find someone like Marcus." Marcus had to look away, blinking rapidly. "That's a good wish," Victoria said softly, catching Marcus's eye over her daughter's head. "That's a very good wish." Later, after the party wound down and the other families went home, Lily found Marcus sitting alone in the foundation's garden. The space was small, just a patch of earth behind the warehouse, but they had planted flowers and vegetables in a small tree that would grow tall over the years. Lily sat down beside him on the bench. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, just thinking. About Daniel. Always about Daniel, but also about you, about how much you've grown this year." Marcus looked at her, this 8-year-old who had stood on a ledge just a year ago and now stood at the center of a community of healing. "You did a good thing today letting those other kids come to your party, sharing your special day with them." Lily shrugged. "They needed a party. Some of them haven't had anything fun in a long time. I know what that's like." "Yes, you do." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over Brooklyn. "Marcus, yeah. I'm glad you gave me Bear, but I think maybe someday Bear should go back to you." Marcus looked at her, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because Bear was Daniel's first. And Bear helped me, but I'm getting better now. I have Mommy, I have you, I have all the kids at Daniel's Light." Lily's voice was steady, older than her years. "And I think maybe there's someone else who needs Bear, someone who doesn't have anyone yet." Marcus felt the words like a gift and a goodbye at the same time. "Maybe someday, but not yet. You keep Bear for now." "Okay." Lily leaned against him, her head resting on his arm. "But when the time comes, I'll give Bear back, so Bear can keep helping people. That's what Daniel would want, right?" "That's exactly what Daniel would want." The anniversary of Daniel's death fell on a Tuesday that year. Marcus drove to the cemetery alone as he always did, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and the weight of 11 years of accumulated grief. The headstone was simple. He and Sarah had chosen it together before they fell apart, just Daniel's name and dates, and a small etching of a dinosaur because Daniel would have wanted a dinosaur. He sat on the grass beside the grave, feeling the March cold seep through his jacket. "Hey, buddy, it's Dad." The words felt strange, as they always did, talking to earth and stone, hoping something somewhere could hear. "A lot has changed since last year. I told you about Lily, remember? She's doing better. Growing up. She turned 8 last month. She had a dinosaur cake at her party because she knows you like dinosaurs." Marcus smiled despite the ache in his chest. "She's not a replacement for you. Nobody could ever replace you. But she reminds me what it felt like to be needed, to matter to someone in that specific way." He traced his finger over the etched dinosaur, a T-Rex that Daniel would have corrected, probably pointing out some anatomical inaccuracy that the stonemason had gotten wrong. "Your mom called last week. We've been talking more lately. Not about getting back together, I don't think either of us wants that. But about you, about the things we remembered wrong and the things we remembered right. She said she's proud of me. For Daniel's Light. For Lily. For finally doing something with the grief instead of just drowning in it." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of spring, of new things growing in soil that held old bones. "I still miss you. Every day. I still wake up sometimes and forget for a second that you're gone, and then I remember and it hits me all over again. I don't think that ever stops." Marcus wiped his eyes. "But it's different now. The missing has company. The grief has purpose. I'm not just carrying it anymore. I'm using it. Turning it into something that might help other kids like you." He stood, brushed grass from his pants. "I love you, Danny. I'll always love you. And I promise I'll keep showing up for Lily, for Victoria, for all the kids at Daniel's Light. I'll keep showing up because that's what you would have wanted. Because that's how I honor you now." He placed the flowers against the headstone and walked back to his car, leaving his son's grave behind, but carrying his son's memory forward. Sarah was waiting for him at the foundation when he returned. She looked different than she had 3 years ago. Softer somehow, less brittle, as if she too had found a way to carry the grief without being crushed by it. She stood in the lobby looking at the photos on the wall, children and volunteers, success stories, the visible evidence of pain transformed into connection. "It's remarkable." Her voice caught him off guard. what you've built here. Marcus stopped a few feet away, uncertain how to bridge the distance between them. It wasn't just me. Victoria did most of the work. You just provided the soul. Sarah turned to face him. I read the articles, the way you train the volunteers, the philosophy behind it. It's everything we needed after Daniel and didn't know how to find. Sarah, I'm sorry for everything, for the accident, for falling apart, for not being the person you needed me to be. Stop. She held up her hand. I didn't come here for apologies. I came because I want to help. Marcus stared at her. I've been in therapy for 2 years, working through my anger, my grief, my guilt about how I treated you. Sarah's eyes glistened. I blamed you because I couldn't bear to blame the universe. I needed a target for my rage, and you were right there still breathing when Daniel wasn't. It was wrong, it was cruel, and I'm sorry. You don't have to. Let me finish. She stepped closer. I'm a nurse. I work with families who've lost children all the time, and I've never known what to say to them. I give them pamphlets and referrals and professional sympathy, and I watch them leave knowing it's not enough. She gestured at the photos on the wall. This is enough. This is what I wish someone had offered us, and I want to be part of it. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had not known was still tied. We could use more volunteers with medical backgrounds, especially for children dealing with illness-related losses. There's a particular kind of grief that comes from watching someone fade, and it helps to have someone who understands the clinical side as well as the emotional side. I'm volunteering then. Sarah reached out and touched his arm, the first physical contact they had had in years. And Marcus, I forgive you. Not because you need my forgiveness, but because I need to give it. I need to let go of the blame so I can finally let go of the anger. I'm trying to forgive myself. It's harder. I know, but you're doing it. Every child you help, every volunteer you train, that's self-forgiveness in action. That's proving to yourself that your survival has meaning. They stood in the lobby of Daniel's Light, two people who had destroyed each other in their grief, now finding a way to rebuild something that was not a marriage, but might be a friendship. It was more than Marcus had ever expected. It was enough. Harrison Ashford died on a Wednesday in October. The old man had softened in his final months, visiting Lily every Sunday, learning to draw dinosaurs alongside her, making up for decades of absence in whatever time he had left. He played board games badly and told stories about Victoria's childhood and taught Lily how to play chess, which she mastered faster than he expected. She has her grandmother's mind, Harrison said during one of their conversations, watching Lily study the board with fierce concentration. Helen was brilliant. I should have told her that more often. When the cancer progressed faster than expected, Harrison accepted it with the same pragmatic resignation he had applied to every challenge in his life. I spent 76 years building things, he told Marcus during one of their last conversations, his voice weak but clear. Company's wealth legacy. I thought that was what mattered. Turns out, the only thing that matters is the people you leave behind and how they remember you. Marcus sat with him in the hospice room, sharing the particular silence of men who had learned to communicate without words. They talked about Daniel, about Jonathan, about all the different ways fathers could fail their children even while trying to protect them. I failed Victoria, Harrison said on one of his last lucid days. I taught her that success was more important than connection. I modeled workaholism and called it strength. And it took her daughter standing on a ledge to show both of us that we had it backwards all along. She knows, and she's breaking the pattern. Because of you. Because you showed her there was another way. Harrison's grip on Marcus's hand was weak but insistent. Take care of them. My girls. Promise me. I promise. Harrison died 3 days later with Victoria and Lily at his bedside. Marcus stood in the hallway giving them privacy, but he heard Lily's voice through the door. It's okay, Grandpa. You can go now. Daddy is waiting for you. And Daniel too. Bear says Daniel will show you all the dinosaurs. The funeral was small, private, nothing like the corporate memorial that Harrison's public life would have warranted. Just family and close friends gathered in the same cemetery where Daniel was buried, laying to rest another person who had learned too late what really mattered. Victoria spoke at the service, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. My father taught me how to run a company, how to negotiate, how to lead, how to win. What he didn't teach me What he didn't know how to teach was how to be present, how to sit with someone in their pain instead of trying to fix it. She looked at the casket. He learned, though, at the end. He learned from Lily, from Marcus, from all the people who showed him that presence matters more than productivity. She placed her hand on the polished wood. Goodbye, Dad. Thank you for finally showing up. It wasn't too late. It's never too late. 2 years after the balcony on the morning of Lily's 9th birthday, she asked Marcus to take her to the ocean. Not just any ocean, the Atlantic, where her father's helicopter had gone down. She had been planning it for months, working with Victoria to identify the approximate coordinates, preparing emotionally with her therapist, gathering the flowers she wanted to drop into the water. Are you sure you're ready for this? Victoria asked that morning, helping Lily into her warmest jacket. Lily nodded, her face serious but calm. I need to say goodbye, really goodbye, so Daddy knows it's okay for me to keep living. They rented a boat, just the three of them, plus the captain. Lily stood at the bow as they motored out into open water, her hair whipping in the wind, Bear clutched against her chest. The day was gray but calm, the ocean swelling gently beneath them. Seabirds wheeled overhead. The coastline receded until it was just a smudge on the horizon, and then they were alone with the water and the sky and the memory of a man who had fallen from the air into this vast expanse. Is this the spot? Lily asked. The captain checked his instruments. Close as we can get, sweetheart. Water's about 200 feet deep here. Lily looked down at the waves, at the vast blue-gray expanse that had swallowed her father. Daddy, it's me. Lily. Her voice was clear, carrying over the wind. I brought you flowers. And I brought Bear, because Bear wanted to say thank you for the helicopter rides you promised, but never got to give us. She dropped the flowers into the water, watched them spread across the surface like colorful stars. I'm 9 now, almost double digits. Mommy says I'm getting too smart for my own good. Lily smiled. Marcus is still around. You'd like him. He tells the truth even when it hurts, just like you did. And he lost his son, so he understands about missing people. Victoria was crying silently. Marcus put his arm around her. I don't talk to you as much as I used to, Lily continued, but that doesn't mean I forgot you. It just means the emptiness doesn't hurt as bad anymore. Marcus says it never goes away. You just learn to walk around it. He's right. I walk around it every day, and some days it's easy and some days it's hard, but I keep walking. She pressed her hand to her heart. You're in here now, not up in the sky like people said. Here. And as long as you're here, you're real. You're part of me. You always will be. Lily turned to Marcus and Victoria. Okay, I'm ready to go back. They motored toward shore, leaving the flowers to drift on the current, carrying love to a depth no living person could reach. That night, Lily gave Bear back to Marcus. He found the stuffed animal on his pillow. When he returned to his apartment, Lily had somehow snuck it there during their goodbye hug. There was a note attached, written in careful 9-year-old handwriting. Dear Marcus, Bear says it's time to go home. Bear has been helping me for 2 years, and Bear did a good job, but now Bear wants to be with Daniel again. You can carry Bear now. I don't need Bear to remember Daddy. Daddy lives in my heart, and so do you. Love, Lily. P.S. Tell Daniel I said hi, and tell him his dinosaur facts were really cool. Marcus sat on his bed holding the worn stuffed animal, crying in a way he had not cried in years. Not tears of grief exactly, but tears of something else released maybe, or recognition. The circle completing itself. The weight he had carried for so long finally transformed into something bearable. He placed Bear on his nightstand next to the photo of Daniel he had finally allowed himself to display. Hey buddy, look who came home. Typo. On the last page of his journal, a habit Dr. Okonkwo had helped him develop, Marcus wrote, they say grief never ends, and they're right. But they don't say that grief can change. That it can become something you carry instead of something that carries you. That it can connect you to people instead of cutting you off from them. I didn't save Daniel, I couldn't. But I helped save Lily, or at least helped her save herself. And in that saving, I found a way to save myself too. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's what Daniel would want. Not a father drowning in guilt, but a father transformed by love that didn't end when his son died, but found new places to go, new hearts to fill. Daniel's light. That's what we built. That's his legacy now. Not a grave in a cemetery, but a foundation that helps children survive what almost destroyed me. He lives on in every kid who learns they're not alone, in every volunteer who transforms their grief into presence, in every moment when someone sits in the dark with someone else and says, I understand, I've been there. You're going to survive this. That's Daniel. That's my boy. Still teaching me things about dinosaurs and love and the endless capacity of the human heart to break and heal and break and heal again. I miss him. I will always miss him. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm swimming, slowly and perfectly, but forward, always forward, because that's what he would want, because that's what love demands. Because in the end, showing up is the only thing any of us can do. And I choose to keep showing up every day for Daniel, for Lily, for myself, for everyone who ever stood on a ledge and wondered if anyone would notice if they fell. I notice. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He closed the journal, turned off the light, and slept. In his dreams, Daniel was laughing about dinosaurs, and for the first time in 12 years, Marcus did not wake up crying. He woke up grateful. That was enough. That was everything.